Hello, my name is Yvette Cozier. I'm the Associate Dean for Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Justice at Boston University School of Public Health. Thank you for joining us for our latest public health conversation starter. Today's conversation is part of our SPH Reads series. SPH Reads is a school-wide reading program hosted by the Office of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Justice. It aims to encourage critical thought and discussion among all members of the BUSPH community and is centered on a carefully chosen, thought-provoking book. The selection for the fall 2024, spring 2025 academic year is Strangers in Their Own Land, Anger and Mourning on the American Right by Arlie Russell Hochschild. In conjunction with this year's book selection, I'm having discussions with leaders on the themes of political divides, class, and race. Today, I have the privilege of speaking with Sandra Clark, the Chief Executive Officer of StoryCorps. Ms. Clark is a leading voice in journalism and beyond, challenging norms and practices that create barriers to building trust and meaningful, sustainable connections with communities. As CEO of StoryCorps, Sandra helps to advance the organization's mission, which is to preserve and share humanity's stories in order to build connections between people and create a more just and compassionate world. Prior to joining StoryCorps in early 2022, Sandra was Vice President for News and Civic Dialogue at WHYY in Philadelphia. There, she led the station's news operation across all platforms and was at the forefront of expanding and diversifying its audiences and outreach communities. As managing editor at the Philadelphia Inquirer prior to joining WHYY, Sandra was a member of both the executive and newsroom leadership team and led the paper to a 2014 Pulitzer Prize for criticism. She is dedicated to growing future generations of leaders of color and is a contributing trainer and mentor for the Maynard Institute. Sandra, thank you for being with us today.
Well, thank you, Dean Cozier. It's really a pleasure to be here.
So could you start by sharing a bit more about your background and how you came to be doing the work you are involved in today?
Yeah, sure. I have to say, we understand so much about our path, so much more about our path when we look back sometimes than when we're planning for it. So most of this was very much unplanned. I grew up thinking I was going to be a doctor and was one of these geeky kids who read medical manuals. And maybe if I had met you earlier, I might have been a doctor in public health. But I always loved writing, always loved talking to people. And so I ended up, when I graduated from the University of Kansas, being hired at the Philadelphia Inquirer as a copy editor, a behind the scenes person who, didn't like any shine on myself. But what it was the beginning of a career that really unexpectedly, but maybe it spoke to who I was, even if I didn't know it at the time, built a career on people behind the scenes, and all the people who work in our organizations who have the best ideas and are never seen, never asked, and never brought to the table. And that's kind of the thread. I eventually became managing editor of the Philadelphia Inquirer, and one step from the top, I felt as empty as ever. And I realized that what was missing in my career was talking to regular, everyday people all the time. And so I went to WHYY in Philadelphia, the public media station, and really did a lot of work in community conversations and community engagement. And little over 2 years ago, StoryCorps came calling, and it was almost cosmic because StoryCorps is built on the stories of everyday people, and that really is kind of where my heart has been throughout.
Wow, thank you. So for those who may not be familiar with StoryCorps, can you share a little bit more about the history and the work of that organization?
Yes, certainly. StoryCorps is 20 years old now. And it was really built on a very kind of ordinary but extraordinary premise, which is that everyone has a story and everyone's story matters. And so 20 years ago, Dave Isay, the founder of StoryCorps, and I would say those who took a leap of faith with him, set up a soundproof booth in Grand Central Terminal, where thousands of people in New York just pass each other and never see each other. And the idea was for people to come into the booth with someone whose story they wanted to honor, sitting across each other, lights are low. They're the only ones in the room except for a StoryCorps facilitator whose job really is to bear witness to these stories, and people could come in and talk about what was most important to them, and whose story they wanted to honor. And in the beginning, no one got it, no one understood. And eventually people really got it to the point where StoryCorps also created a way to collect stories from across the country by sending Airstream trailers across the country into communities that most of us probably have never been to, most of us will never see, and working with public media stations across the country. And people sign up, they come in, and they talk about whatever it is that they want to talk about. And by learning about each other, by learning people's stories that people who we probably would never get to meet either. And these stories are so powerful when people think of this legacy, because their stories, if they choose, can be shared in the Library of Congress. So 100 years from now, your family member, friends, anyone can hear your stories. And these are the stories that appear on NPR, that make us pull over the side of the road each week. I mean, many people have, the women in particular will say to me, you make my mascara run every single Friday. But all people, who have pulled over the side of the road because these stories stop us, make us think about our own experiences and the stories of others. They create empathy and understanding in a way that kind of are unimaginable. And that is, StoryCorps' method of trying to create a more just and compassionate world.
Wow. So for this series of discussions, we're tackling the themes of political divides, class, and race. So it seems fitting to talk about StoryCorps' One Small Step series that brings people, as you said, with different views together to record a conversation, not to debate politics, but to simply get to know each other as people. Can you share a little bit more about the One Small Step and how that began?
Yeah, so Dave Isay, again, some years ago, really became concerned about the polarization in our country. And it's not about the fact that we argue. Democracy is built on disagreement and arguing, but the fact that we stop seeing each other as human beings again. And so much of our rhetoric, so much of our just sort of our, existence in so many places, right? All kinds in institutions and school board meetings. It's all these kind of places where churches, where, there should be a way for us to bridge our interests, and people stop seeing each other as human beings. And the data was quite startling. Many people think that, I think just in a few years' time, the numbers have gone from 15 to 23% of people who think violence is required, right, to save the country. There's data from Republicans, Democrats, almost the same, who see each other not as real human beings, right, and that there's actual real evil in that person. And so, StoryCorps' lane is, how do we see each other as human beings? How do we hear each other's stories? So he started this project called One Small Step, which is, bringing together people across the partisan divide to talk to each other as human beings. And we started in Wichita, in Columbus, Georgia, in Richmond, Virginia, Fresno, California. And now we've gone national with this effort of connecting people. And these are such extraordinary conversations. I mean, people who are just relieved that they can actually talk to someone across the divide. And so StoryCorps creates that mechanism for us to be able to do that. And by the way, we also just started doing work in universities as well.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. I hope you come to BU and maybe BU School of Public Health. That'd be wonderful. So what have you learned from the One Small Step series? And are there any specific conversations or themes that stood out to you?
Yeah, I think what we've learned, and again, this is where the real richness and value of lived experience and hearing someone else's story. I think most people who actually do these One Small Step conversations, and the reason it's called One Small Step is because for us to really conquer any of these insurmountable kinds of things, these things we feel are insurmountable, it takes one small step. It's achievable by everyone. And what we've learned are some common themes. I mean, people, for one, are very relieved. And actually, some people even leave slightly disappointed because they really thought the person on the other side was going to be crazy. And what they discover is that we have so much more in common than we know. And so we do, we want our kids to grow up a certain way. We care about healthcare, and so one-on-one, people actually get to express things that they can't, they actually don't even have a voice in all of this kind of, all of this division, right? We hear people talking about their own biases and their own stereotypes of each other. I mean, there's a really great conversation between, two Black participants where one says to the other one, you know what? I actually thought you were going to be a white man when you walked in the door. So I had to check myself, right? You hear people saying how frustrated they are with their own groups, who sometimes are the biggest barriers to being able to talk to someone across the divide, because we are in cancel culture, right? We are more judged by our own sometimes than we are about those across the divide. What we know is that, amid all the kind of scary statistics that are very, very real, what we know is that there's, actually, what is more in common, that which does a lot of research on polarization, calls the exhausted majority. So the majority of the country actually isn't part of the most extreme divisions, right? The majority of the country actually is there to, and willing to sort of walk toward each other. But they don't have a place to go. And so I think if we understood that we were actually in the majority, and at the same time, had some place where we could go, it would make a huge difference.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, it's true. So this discussion will be shared with the School of Public Health community at the beginning of the fall academic semester, just really a couple of weeks away. And will be shared amidst the backdrop of the upcoming federal election in November, as well as many other themes and things playing their way out in our society today. Do you have any advice for our students in our school community about engaging with people with different viewpoints and perspectives?
Yeah, I think again, it's one small step, right? It's like, it's not an all or nothing kind of thing. You're not selling your soul if you're talking to someone from the other side. And in fact, one of the things that we've heard from, the student communities we've worked with, in the cities we've worked, is that, it actually is incredibly enriching. You learn something about someone else, and that also tests what you think, that as well, right? And so if we're all in this space where we're really trying to continue to educate ourselves, it's actually the thing that opens up your world in ways that you can't possibly imagine. So, I mean, a little of my own personal story, and this is also why StoryCorps is special to me. My mother is from Japan. My father is African American from Louisiana. So I grew up in the best culinary household you can ever.
Yeah.
But the thing is, about their lives is that my dad, he was in the military, career military guy, raised a flag in front of our house every single day, even as he didn't have access to all the rights that he was fighting for other people, right? And yet that is who he was. And he was somebody who was proud of his service, and at the same time was living in some very hard truths. But always was in that kind of space where he just wanted to hear other people's experience, and he wanted to make a difference. And so he worked with a lot of young youth who were in trouble. When he died, we were in the middle of Kansas. He had retired in the middle of Kansas. And many people came up to us and told us how he actually saved their families. He
Wow.
saved, he saved their children in many ways, because he was just a great listener. And he could have been one of these people who, didn't talk to people and kind of closed himself off, but that wasn't him. My mother, many people, because she spoke with an accent, thought that she couldn't actually understand what they were saying. And so she actually knew everybody's stories because people would talk in front of her and say all these things, assuming that she didn't understand, and she understood every single word. And when she passed, we found these little slivers of paper with English words written on them, and those were her flashcards, and those were her attempts to, to be a part of America, right? As she also tried to, preserve her own culture, piping in Japanese television in the middle of Kansas. So, there is so much richness and nuance in how we come to things. And we have a choice of whether we want to be humane. We have a choice of whether we want to be empathetic and open ourselves up to understanding. And I think that when we push each other in these binary choices of whether you agree with me or disagree with me, and actually don't even allow ourselves within our own groups to articulate how we feel, that's the advice, is just leave yourself open, and not just leave yourself open, but we all know we live in silos. And so take a step toward talking to someone who you would not necessarily agree with or even see. I mean, there's so many people out there whose life experiences inform how they are now, but also, we have choices of how we want to live in the future too.
Yeah, so your words, thank you for sharing that. You make me think of the difference between a safe space and a brave space.
Yes.
And stepping out to hear someone else is actually a position of bravery, an act of bravery. And
yeah, absolutely. And it's a mutual bravery, right? So one small step, the conversations actually start with each person reading out loud the other person's biography. So they write a paragraph about themselves, and so they read out loud each other's stories. And I think it's the thing that makes us just mutually respect each other, understand that, your story matters as much as mine. But, I think that taking that step to actually be that is really, it's not as much work as we think it is.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I want to thank you so much for your words, for your work, and for sharing your perspective with us today. I know that this has been enlightening to me, and I know that this will be a very helpful part for students as they begin this journey in public health. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you for the invitation, and I'm going to tell everybody to read your writings, because there's so much in them that we are two sides of the same coin.
Well, I love to hear that. Thank you so much.
Thank you.